The problem that we are going to solve now involves the input table as quiz. This table has below columns quiz date, that is the date on which the employee appeared for the quiz. empId is the employee ID. empName is the name of the employee. Result is pass or fail for the quiz that the user attended, and score is the quiz score. So each entry here represents a quiz that the employee has attended and the corresponding status of it, whether it is pass and how much is the score. So this is the input. As part of the output, what we need to do is we need to add one additional column, that is comments. This column will hold value valid or invalid. So if the employee passes the quiz, so once the employee passes the quiz, all the following entries has to be marked as invalid. Okay, so for example, in this case, the employee Kiran has passed the quiz on 2nd April. So any quiz attempted after 2nd April has to be marked invalid. So as seen in the output, the 2nd April is a valid entry, but the entry following it is marked as invalid. So as soon as an employee passes for the first time, all the quiz entries after that has to be marked invalid. Another example is for this employee Mayank. Mayank has passed the quiz on 6th May. So this entry is valid, but the entry following it is invalid. So as seen in the output, for the employee Mayank, the pass entry is valid and the entry following it is marked as invalid. The next case is for the employee Ram. So Ram has a fail entry and then a pass entry. So both will be a valid, because the ask here is that we need to mark the entries invalid that are present after the first pass entry. So there are no entries after the pass status. So that's why there will be no invalid entries for the employee Ram. The last employee here is Shruti. So Shruti has no pass entries. So all the entries will be valid for Shruti. Okay. So only in the scenarios wherein we have any entries after the first pass, all has to be marked as invalid. So this is the ask here. So now let's work on this to get this comments column. Okay, so let's write the query for this. So what we will do is, as a first step, we will operate on this input table quiz for each. So what we will do is we will just filter out the pass entries first. Okay, so we are operating on this input data. So where result is pass, we are getting all those entries. And what now we will do is we will try to fetch the first pass entry for each employee. Okay. So what we will do is we will do a grouping. We will group by the employee ID, and for each of the employee ID, we want the first pass entry, that is the first quiz date on which the employee has passed. So what we will do is we will use the min function on the quiz date. So this will be the first pass date column. So let's run this and see the output. So for each of the employee, now we will have the first pass date. For example, for employee Kiran, the first pass entry is on 2nd April. So employee ID 49 has 2nd April as the first pass date. Similarly, for the employee Mayank with employee ID 44, the first pass date is 6th May. And for Ram, the first pass entry with the state result equal to pass is on 9th April. So we have obtained the first pass date for each of the employee. For the employee who have not passed will not have any entry generated. So this is our first step. Okay. So having this entries, now what we will do is let's create a CTE for this. So let's call it pass CTE. Okay. So this is, so now what we will do is we will use the quiz table, the input table, give the Elias as Q, and we will left join with this table, with this pass CTE table. Okay. So we will see why are we doing this, and we will do it on the employee ID column. Okay. So now if we see all the columns, okay, now if you see the all the columns after the join, this is what we have. Okay. So maybe what we will do is we will keep all the input columns, and from the join column just keep the first pass date. This is what we just derived. So we'll just keep this column and now run it. Okay. And one more thing, let's order it by the employee name and the quiz date so that it is easier to understand what is going on here. Okay. So now let's see what we have. So what we have done basically, for each of the employee, we have added, so the rest of the column is the same. This is same as the quiz columns, the input table columns. The extra column that now we have added after the join is the first pass date. This date is the date on which the employee passed the quiz for the first time. So for every column corresponding to the employee, we will have the first pass date. So likewise, for each and every employee, we will have the entries for the first pass date. For the employee who has not passed the exam anytime, it will show null as we have used left join. So wherever the join has not, the condition is not satisfied, null will be populated. Okay. So now when we have this first pass date, now when we know which is the date on which the employee has passed the quiz for the first time, we will keep only the entries where the quiz date is before or is equal to this first pass date. So anything after this, after the first pass date, has to be marked as invalid. Okay. So for example, we will compare this with first pass date. It is same. So we will mark this entry as valid. Any entry where the quiz date is greater. So for example, this entry, we will mark it as invalid. Even this case, here also, this quiz date is greater than the pass date. So even for Mayank, for 6th June entry, we will mark it as invalid. So likewise, we will see if the quiz date is less than equal to, those will be valid. If it is greater than the first pass date, it will be valid. Also, for these scenarios where it is null, all this will be valid entries because these are entries before any pass status. Like these are not the entries after the pass status, as the employee has not passed. So this also will be counted as the valid entries. Okay. So now let's work on this approach and get the solution. So what now we will do is we already have done the join condition. Okay. And we will operate on this data which we have just generated. So what we will do is we will write a case condition. For now, let's have this column and we will write a case condition. So what we will say is when the first pass date, if this is null. Okay. If it is null, this is for the last condition. If it is null, then it's a valid entry. Okay. So for the scenarios wherein the user has not passed the exam anytime, all the entries will be valid. So it is this scenario. Okay. Another thing is, if we have the value populated for first pass date, then our quiz date should be less than equal to first pass date. Okay. So this case also is a valid scenario wherein the quiz date is before or same as the first pass date. Okay. So for example, this scenario, it is same as the first pass date. Or we can take this scenario. For RAM, both the entries will be valid as the quiz date is less than or equal to the first pass date. So the entries will be marked as valid. For all the other scenarios, which basically includes that the quiz date is greater than the first pass date, we will mark the entries as invalid and we will end the case condition. Okay, and let's call it as the status quiz, or let's call it as comments. Okay, so now let's run this, and what we will do is we will remove. Oh, okay. For now, we will run this first. Okay, so we have got the comments column. For now, we will remove this first. First, we will check and then we'll remove. So, like we see, just to confirm that the comments is rightly updated, we will just verify that. So here quiz date is same as first pass date, so it is valid. When quiz date is greater than the first pass date, it is invalid. Similarly for Mayank, whenever the quiz date is same, it is valid. Whenever it is greater than the first pass date, it is invalid. And for Ram, since the quiz date is less than equal to the first pass date, all the entries are valid. And for Shruti, since there is no first pass date, all the entries are valid. So the comments are rightly populated. We can remove this column as it is not required as part of the final results, and we will just run it. So this is our final solution. Okay, let's have a look once. So this is our final solution. We have added the additional column, that is comments, and marked the records valid for the ones less than equal to the first pass date. That is, whenever the user has passed, all the quiz taken before or on that day is valid, and any quiz taken after the first pass date are marked as invalid. Okay, so this is the query that we have written. First we have determined which is the first pass date, and then based on the check whether where the quiz date is lying or whether user has never passed the test, we have labeled the status as valid or invalid. Okay, so please go through it. The create table statement and insert statements will be added in the description. If you have any alternate solution, please post it in the comments. If you found this video useful, please like the video and please subscribe the channel if you have not yet subscribed. Thank you.